Terry and Wayne. All right, folks, we're going to reconvene an open session. Welcome, everyone. Folks, we'll begin briefly. Thank you for your patience. Okay, got mine. All right, folks, we're ready to begin. I'd like to start off with some commissioner reports and comments. Commissioner Baker, would you begin?
I have nothing to report, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Kiefer?
Yes, just one quick comment. Yesterday was our first meeting of our ad hoc ethics advisory committee. I believe that's the name. Those meetings are open to the public. We have a future meeting coming up, a date to be determined, where they will solicit public comment. So hopefully we can have some more information on that once a date is finalized, and hopefully we have a good turnout.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Meimelschmidt?
Got nothing. Thank you.
Okay, I have a few things I'd like to add. In sorrow, I'd like to announce the passing of Buddy Blake. He was a volunteer fireman at Smithsburg, over 50 years of dedication to his community. His funeral will be later this week. I'd like for you all to keep him and his family in your prayers and thank him for his unyielding service to Washington County. Second, Rob's not here. I'm going to wait till he walks back in the room and embarrass him on something if he comes back. July 4th, we had our Salute to Independence down at the Antietam National Battlefield. Every day should be a salute to independence, and I thank the battlefield and all the sponsors in the county who all put that event in place. It was rain delayed and some concerts, music wasn't played, but again, it's an outstanding tribute to the founding of our nation, the birth of our nation here in Washington County. Since Rob hasn't returned, he can watch the replay, but Rob was recently in the newspaper this past week with an exchange student that he had hosted, and I wanted to personally thank him on behalf of the county for hosting a student from another country, as I believe his daughter was a student at that family's home overseas as well. So Rob, even though you're not here, you may be listening, thank you for doing that. With that being said, I'd like to welcome our guests from the Maryland Association of Counties. Would you please come forward and introduce yourself, and welcome to Washington County.
Thank you very much for having us. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Michael Sanderson. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Association of Counties, extending regrets on behalf of the Association President. Harford County Executive Barry Glassman had hoped to join us today. We had worked out scheduling and so forth, and your staff has been very helpful in getting us onto your agenda. We're grateful for that. With a county executive as the president of the statewide association, it's a mixed blessing. Their schedules are tougher to work with, and unfortunately, he had to unplug from today. Joining me today is Natasha Mayhew. She's MACO's legislative director. The two of us are going to try and cover the ground that we would have otherwise, with regrets from County Executive Glassman. With that, we plan to spend just a few minutes, and then if you have questions or things that you'd like to talk about from the organization, we're happy to get into that as well. I've distributed a packet of stuff. Starts with looking back at the last legislative session. It wraps with looking ahead to the summer conference in August, and in between is a synopsis of a variety of issues that have been hot and continue to be hot and so forth. Natasha and I will speak principally to legislative and policy matters, but also a few services and education things too. So with your indulgence, I'll speak for just a couple of moments about the legislative issues and start with fiscal matters. That tends to be the biggest area where state decisions trickle down and affect your budget and your priorities. MACO strives to be the voice of county governments across the state. We're guided by MACO's legislative committee. Commissioner Meinl-Schmidt was a regular attendee and a positive presence for our staying relevant. The reason that Natasha and her colleagues on the policy staff get the reception they do in Annapolis. When we knock on doors and when we make phone calls, people answer. A big part of that is because the decisions are guided by elected officials. There's a peer relationship with the General Assembly and you all as elected officials. We try and carry out that work, but the credibility comes from being driven by you all. I'll speak to fiscal issues for a moment and just say this wasn't the big, tough fight on the budget that sometimes things are in Annapolis. This past year was relatively calm. There was some money in reserve that made this year's budget plan relatively easy to swallow. The legislature didn't have to do major overhauls to Governor Hogan's proposed budget. There were Nixon cuts and so forth. We're in the midst of a little bit of drama of some reserved money that is optional for the governor to spend. He's announced he doesn't plan to do so for the coming year. He's already looking ahead to next year, and that's my biggest mention on fiscal issues is this last year wasn't a circumstance where we're fending off cost shifts or unwelcome budget cuts that would affect your budgets and so forth. But next year may very well be that climate. The state keeps track of what it calls a structural deficit and looking at, rather than this year's total cash available and the spending plan for it, if you look at ongoing revenues and ongoing expenditures, you make vanilla assumptions about each. The state's already got a problem of $800 or $900 million for next year's budget. So come January, we may very well be back in that circumstance of fending off Nixon cuts and budget cuts and cost shifts and that sort of thing. So that may be coming anyway. That's before we think about, is there a weakness in the economy coming? You ask a dozen economists and you probably get at least 12 different answers about what's going to happen with the economy. But government revenues are very sensitive to the economy. The state, even more so than the county, they don't rely on property tax to the extent that local governments do. There's some cushion in the property tax, not so much with the sales tax and income tax. People lose jobs or they don't feel comfortable enough to buy a new refrigerator, the state starts feeling that as a revenue pinch pretty quickly. If we have a regional or national recession start sometime soon, that'll just add to a problem we're already facing structurally. And the last big unknown on fiscal issues for the state is education spending. We know the state is in now the third year of a big evaluation of school formulas and funding and outcomes and accountability and a whole range of things with the state's relationship with the public school system. Where that goes isn't entirely clear. The piece that they've reserved for this year is basically sorting through the funding formulas, the way that funding is distributed among the school systems, funding that's targeted to special classes of students and a variety of other things. That's where we find out what the contribution from counties that the state would expect is going to appear, and also what new commitment of funds the state may need to come up with if they want to set these lofty and very aspirational goals for what to expect from public education in this state. These are the biggest decisions that probably the state is looking at over this 4-year term, what to do on school funding and how to get from here to there. So that's the biggest show in town. There's some detail in this packet, but if it's something you want to talk about further, we're happy to get into that. For the moment, I'll turn to Natasha to speak to a couple of legislative issues that were high priority for us this past legislative session, all of which have a tail into the future.
All right, so the first issue I'll bring up is Next Gen 911, and this is one of MACO's initiatives for the past session. We put in a lot of effort to build together a commission to study the 911 system and to make recommendations to advance it. In this session, we passed a bill that established framework and funding to bring 911 into the future. We often say that at the moment, Uber can find you quicker and easier than 911 can. So with passage of the bill, it will put a framework for better call location finding, better use of overflow for calls, the ability to do text and video for calls. It was a major bipartisan success for one of our initiatives. We also had success on the preemption front. So one of our big issues there were small cells. With the wireless industry pushing bills that they've successfully passed in 20 other states that would have preempted counties and municipalities from having a say in the zoning of small cells in your local right-of-ways. So these are micro tower facilities that could go on light poles and bus stops, and had that bill passed, you would not be able to say, no, you can't put it on this pole or that one, or we have problems with this. We beat back that bill, and that was very significant given the success in them preempting local jurisdictions in 20 other states. We continue to do work on preemption with a bit more focus now on implied preemption. One of the areas there is with solar siting. And these are implied preemption cases, or cases in which the courts have stepped in and said that locals are preempted, where the General Assembly has not taken action. And so we'll continue to do work on that. We're in the process of working through our initiatives process for next year. And so we will have a committee looking at a number of different issues that we could potentially pursue in order to ensure counties' authorities and rights and interests are met in the 2020 session. I'll turn it over a bit to talk a bit about our events. This past June, we had a spring symposium. The symposium this year was on human trafficking. Our symposiums are deep dives, half-day events in which we focus on a particular hot topic for counties. At this symposium, we had state officials as well as county representatives come and talk about sharing information about what they're doing to tackle human trafficking in the state. In August, we will have our summer conference, and so that is August 14th through 19th. The theme is Winds of Change. At the summer conference, we'll have over 2,500 participants, over 30 educational sessions for our members, with over 90 speakers covering a wide variety of topics that are important for local governments to learn more about. And so we hope to all see you there in Ocean City in August.
With that, Mr. President, the other thing in the packet I'd like to point out is the back of the front page is a placeholder for a 45-minute conversation we're not going to have. And that is, the easiest thing for us to do is to try and come and hit a few high notes. We'll talk about a handful of bills, we won on this, we fended that off, this is going to be a fight, that's a big deal. What we don't want to do is spend the time talking about dozens and dozens and dozens of little bills. But Commissioner Meinl-Schmidt will tell you that's the grist of the work of the MACO Legislative Committee. Week by week, we bring in the elected officials and take positions on dozens and dozens of bills. A lot of them are well-meaning proposals that have an implementation problem at the county level. They would mandate you do something that you don't have the funds for, or they would mess up a program that you're already delivering locally, that sort of thing. It's a big part of what MACO does is to stand up for those kinds of issues. They're not exciting, they're not sexy, but they're functionally important, and that's a big part of our voice on your behalf. So a one-pager saying, by our count, there were 93 different bills on there that would have compromised your local revenues or overextended your staff or interfered with a local priority. Those are the sort of things where we got amended out of the bill, or the bill was defeated, or some accommodation to make sure that your recycling plan can work fine, even if they have a new state policy, that sort of thing. We do a lot of that kind of work. It's not exciting, but below the line, it's really where a lot of the bread and butter is getting done. That said, Mr. President, thanks very much for the time on your agenda. I know you have other things to get to today, but we're happy to take questions or talk about things if you have more.
Commissioners, thoughts or comments?
Thank you. I'll be down there in August. See you there.
One
Looking
of the things
forward to
I
it.
would bring up, court's been working on a possible bill for medical reimbursement, which would really help our volunteer system, correct?
Yes.
And that's something he's working on. Thank him for that. But just some comments. The Kerwin Commission is driving everybody in every county nuts, not knowing and be able to plan on how hard or difficult the financial requirement on counties would be with the maintenance of effort. And Kerwin, it's the 12 small counties in Maryland that constantly are named low effort will be extremely hit hard with additional requirements mandated by state on Kerwin. And I don't think any commissioner here is against education. It's how we worry how we pay for it and don't sacrifice other services. And the other comment, you hear it all the time, highway user revenues. We're stuck with doing chip and seal. I think I see some staff out there that would say chip and seal is not the best method, but paving is. But limit on funds and the restoration of that to Washington County was approximately $9 million. Is that 9 to 10 million over that 10-year period? That's 80 to 90 million dollars of roads we haven't been able to pave, and the citizenry wants to know why we're not paving their roads. Well, one reason is the funding from the state has not come back fully, and that is so important because what happens is that money that we extend to paving or chip and seal takes away from the emergency services, the volunteer system, or more money that we could dedicate to education. So the restoration of those funds back to that 10 million level would extremely help, especially the 12 small counties.
Mr. President, you're hitting the obvious high notes. These are the giant two fiscal issues in the room with the state and the counties.
Please forgive me for repeating
No,
that.
it's, I mean, this is well taken. An important part of this outreach, with or without the elected leadership of the association, is to hear what's on your mind.
One of the reasons I repeat that, our citizens are busy, and they think that they're not so aware of all the things that we
Sure.
are, and that we need to remind them that we need those funds restored. Instead of chipping and seal, maybe we can start paving more roads, or that money dedicated for that could go to other services. So on behalf of all the commissioners, if there's no more comments, thank you for coming to Washington County. Appreciate seeing you.
Thank you very much for your support, commitment. We look forward to seeing you at the conference and into the legislative session as well.
Safe in your travels. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Next, we'll have reports from county staff. Who would like to step forward? Mr. Hobbs or Mr. Hayes, please come forward.
Sarah. So we came into today to give a real quick brief update on the fire rescue financial accounting procedures that will be going into place or have gone into place effective July 1, 2019. And in reality, they're really not new. They're covered in the emergency services fiscal policy that was adopted by the commissioners in 2013. Our process today, we've drafted a letter that we'd like to send out to the volunteer fire and rescue companies explaining really the content of the fiscal policy and what will be required going forward beginning July 1, 2019. We're also here, and I'll let CFO Greaves give some comments to that, looking for some consensus to provide additional funding that will allow us to pay some of the previous expenses that were not covered in our current budget because of timing of the programs and being there the recent closed calendar or fiscal year, and we're looking to reset that. So I'll let Sarah give you some information on that.
Thanks, Dave. Yes, as some of the commissioners are aware, maybe all of you, we have historically reimbursed for fuel, utilities, and maintenance costs for the fire and EMS companies for previous past fiscal years. So in some cases, for fuel and maintenance may have been a calendar year, and utilities may have been on a fiscal year reimbursement for a prior year. What we would like today is to move forward reimbursing for expenses incurred in the current periods. So, for instance, the first reimbursement request from the companies to the accounting firm would cover July 1 through September 30th of 2019, which is our first quarter for our fiscal year 20. And those reimbursement requests would include expenditures for that period only. So in order to do that, we have, as Dave said, drafted this letter, and we are recommending to distribute an amount of money equal to the amounts given to us from Washington County VFRA for the company's fuel, utility, and maintenance costs for fiscal years 18 and 19. And I do have a motion here I will need from you because, as Dave suggested, these funds are not budgeted in our 2020 budget. They would be over and above what we have allocated to those companies for fiscal year 2020. And so I would also like today a consensus to send this letter that was just distributed with the initial reimbursement check and accompanying documentation that is provided in the letter, which includes the emergency services fiscal policy, which was adopted in 2013, and the scope of services for accounting and review services. So that is the consensus, and then the motion would be to approve these distributions up to an amount of $2.5 million to the fire and EMS companies for reimbursement of the fiscal year 18 and 19 fuel maintenance and utility costs, with funding to come from capital reserves. Do you have questions?
How many companies, entire membership?
Yes,
It's like 26.
20,
26.
26.
Commissioner?
And that is for both fire and
So
EMS.
this reimbursement, you said, would be for July 1st through September 30th?
The disbursement that I spoke about distributing currently would be for expenditures that have already been incurred. So the period that I spoke about for July 1 to September 30th, that will be going forward the reimbursement that they will need to make to the accounting firm at the end of September of this year.
So, Commissioners, just for some clarification at the 30,000 foot level that Dave and Sarah have been involved in this as well as I, is that under past practice, under the fiscal policy adopted in 13, under past practice, this similar payment would happen on and around July 1st for prior fiscal years. Is that correct, Sarah?
For the first quarter of it, yes.
For the first quarter. As we transition into the new accounting system that was adopted and awarded by the commissioners beginning July 1st, this funding that is also meets the policy will provide the cash flow to the companies. So we'd like to make that payment as early as today to the companies so they have the cash flow necessary to continue to proceed while we transition to a reimbursement on a quarterly basis, which I think, Vice President Baker, is what you were speaking to, up to the first quarter, July to September 30th will be the first quarter. And we will be working with the company, staff will be, and the new accounting firm with the companies to see the documentation along the way is met, so that first quarter payment is as full as possible with reimbursement.
I guess what I don't understand is if we should already be in a position to provide that money. I don't understand why it has to come out of the capital reserves.
And that would be explanation. Sarah, if you could help us provide
Sure,
that.
sure. So in the past, the budget for, let's just take the current budget, fiscal year 2020's budget, the budget that we're in today, was developed based on a reimbursement period of a prior year. So fuel and maintenance was the previous calendar year. So 2018 was the most recent previous calendar year as we develop our 2020 budget in the current 19 year. So that is why there is a year's lag for that calendar year period, because of the way that the Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association and the documents that were provided for utilities and fuel and maintenance reimbursement was always done in that previous reimbursement period method. So the reason that we need the money today to move forward reimbursing costs just for the current period is because under the previous method, the money that they would be receiving in 2020 would actually be for calendar and fiscal year 18. So we have almost a 2-year period to make up to get things on a reimbursement schedule that is current.
Would it
Does
be
that help?
So we're going to be paying back the capital reserves?
We will be taking funding out of capital reserves to make these payments. If there's additional funding in the future that we receive from additional revenue, we can certainly put it back into our reserves. That is our general policy with
I guess I'm just having trouble understanding if we were going to be accountable. I don't know if accountable is the word. If we were going to have to reimburse this money at some point in time, and we're getting it ready to move it forward now, somewhere along the line that money would have had to been in place.
Yeah, so generally it
So it
is.
sounds to me like the money's not in place, so we're going into the capital reserves to get money in place.
That's correct, because we're making a change from how it was previously done. So previously, it was reimbursing a period that was a prior fiscal year, and now it is moving it to reimbursing the current year expenditures. And so there is a 2-year makeup period, I guess you could call it, that you need
Can I-
to set things right.
Can I say something? One of the, if we didn't have to catch up, then the payment the first quarter of the 2020 budget, that'd be paid in the 2022 year. So if we have to catch that up, this payment that we're making September wouldn't have to be paid until 2022.
I'm just having trouble understanding catch-up, but anyhow.
So really, in reality, Commissioner, the volunteer companies have been holding expenses that were in the past for up to a full year in both cases before they would get into our budget. And that was really for a planning so that we would have full budget cycles for where those expense programs were managed, that we could plug those numbers definitively into our current upcoming budget. With going now to being real-time reimbursement, they won't have to carry those expenses any farther, but to be able to make a clean line in the sand, so to speak, so that we start new July 1, we need to pay out money we already owe them, but wouldn't have been included in the 2020 budget, would have been included in the 2021 budget. And every year, it just repeats itself. What we're proposing is let's clean that balance sheet and start anew July 1. We need the current money that's in our current 2020 budget to start a new July 1, we need the money to pay them back what they already owed. So this is money we owe them. They've been the bank, so to speak, to some degree with the program as it's moved forward.
A quick question, Sarah, just give me round numbers. I don't need it to the penny or anything, but how much do we expect to pay out of the reserve? And how much is in that reserve, and what kind of a required level are we supposed to maintain?
Well, the capital reserves is over and above our 17% requirement. So we have a lot of flexibility there.
Put that into a dollar amount.
The 17% or what we have in the capital?
17%.
The
What is that?
17% reserve, approximately $38 million.
Okay, and where are we now?
And we were at the end of last fiscal year when we do the cash reserve calculation, we were at 17.5%, which is approximately $1 million more than the requirement. And so the capital reserve is other reserve funds that we have available. Approximately 11.5 million is the balance. So the amount that we need would be up to $2.5 million. And the reason that's the amount that we would need is because an annual fiscal year reimbursement is approximately 1.5 million for fuel, utilities, and maintenance for these fire and EMS companies. So we're looking to, during this catch-up period, reimburse 1 full year for fuel, utilities, and maintenance, and then a partial year for fuel and maintenance, and another full year for utilities, since one is on a previous fiscal year reimbursement and one is on a calendar year. So let me just bring that up. 1.5 million is the annual cost. We expect about 2.5 million in total if documentation is provided that can substantiate those expenditures.
Commissioners, any other questions? Would you be so kind to repeat the motion?
Sure. Move to approve distributions up to 2.5 million to fire and EMS companies for reimbursement of fiscal year 18 and fiscal year 19 fuel, maintenance, and utility costs, with funding to come from capital reserves.
Commissioners, is there someone like the motion?
I'll make the motion.
I have a first. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a first and second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
And a consensus to send the letter as well, sir.
Consensus to send a letter. Thank you.
I want to underscore, commissioners, and to everyone, that this letter is very important and that it's a new system. It doesn't change anything in the policy, but it's a new system of reimbursement. It's under the accounting practices that were established by the policy in 2013. So it's incredibly important that the letter is understood and it is adhered to, so the documentation in place is possible, so that staff and the accounting firm can make the approvals to make the payments moving forward. So, thank you.
And we have included in the letter that at the 30-day mark, we'll reach out to the companies to try to make sure that they have an understanding of the required documentation, so that, as we spoke, that they're getting the full reimbursement that they should be due, that we don't get to the 90-day mark only to find out that the information that they thought they had ready to submit wasn't according to policy. So we're going to try to make sure that we have a hand-in-hand approach at about a 30-day mark if there's anybody that has questions. So we'll be working with a third-party vendor as well.
Director Hayes, while you're here, can you give us an update on the SAFER grant?
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, roughly 2 weeks ago, we did get an email from FEMA asking us to make sure that our SAMS number was active. That's a number that we're required to have with the federal government that allows us to receive federal grant money. We believe that's probably a positive indicator that they're making sure that, look, if this grant comes through, you're ready to receive it and there aren't any obstacles going forward. As far as any official notification, we haven't received any at this point. We continue to work with county staff at this point on some of the initial issues that we have to deal with hiring 29 firefighters and having a larger contingency of staff out in the volunteer workforce. We've talked about an MOU with the attorney's office. It's something that we plan on working through. So we're trying to get the preliminary legwork out front so that if we get notification, we're in a pretty positive position to actionize that grant. We did do firefighter testing. I believe that was June 28th. So we have at least an eligibility list that we're building at this point. So we're trying to get through that.
And then in regards to the, I guess the EMS, additional EMS funding and operations, are we going to be having a plan coming back to us soon on how we're going to be implementing the additional revenue being used for the EMS?
Right. We've met with it's called the LS Subsidy Subgroup, which is a committee of the association, and they've been asking the same question: what is the direction moving forward? We've not really done any work at this point as far as actually formalizing a plan. I think probably at some point we'll need to understand where the commissioners might want us to be, whether that's to start trying to come up with a plan to bring staffing into a single employment system under county employment, or is it divide the money up into each of the individual stations? Do we bring them all at one time? Do we phase this in? I don't know that I have a clear enough direction with that yet, but we're prepared to work on any direction given.
Well, I think if we could come up with, just like you said, 2 or 3 options and the ups and downs to all of those and bring it in
Okay.
front of the commissioners, because that January is going to come
It
sooner
will.
than we know, and we make sure we have a plan in place, don't have to jump through hoops.
And I would emphasize strongly that we won't have till October or November to make this decision. We'll have to have this probably in September, or maybe even slightly before that, because there's a lot of planning that will have to go, especially if it involves consolidating staff or merging staff. That's going to be a lot of work. Even if it's just a small part of staff, there's still a lot to do with that. So I'll take that back to the group, and we'll see if we can't get something to report here shortly.
And I believe you're coming in next week with an update on the Smithsburg
Yeah, that was going to be.
situation,
We are.
follow-up question.
Yes.
which would, I'm sorry, sir,
Go ahead, I'll yield to you.
which would also allow us to understand better how that system worked and what improvements may be made with additional overview or oversight, such that that may be one of the potential parts of the solution.
Yeah, we do. Okay,
Thank you.
Forward. Thank you.
very good. Thanks.
Continuing with county staff reports. Mr. Mason.
Good morning, Dave Mason, Department of Solid Waste. I'm here just give you a brief update on our electronics recycling program. A couple weeks ago, we received a letter from Unicor, our vendor, who part of the Federal President Industries. They are no longer accepting anything CRT glass, which would be your old TVs, monitors, and whatnot, which is probably about 90% of what we receive in our electronics recycling program. So we have been scrambling over the last few weeks to find another vendor or another option. We've got a couple of leads, but are not ready to move on those yet. We need to do our background checks on the companies and make sure everybody's valid and, straightforward with what we're doing with all the recycling. So until then, we have a little bit of money in the budget. We will recycle most likely what we have collected. But we need to try to move in a different direction, which may lead to us coming back in a few weeks and asking for a new fee structure for the recycling. Right now, it's just basically $10 a TV. We charge a minimum scale load, but with the uncertainty of the direction, we may have to come in and ask for higher rate or whatever. But
I was hoping you were going to be coming back and telling us you're going to have to decrease the cost to recycle. That would be great.
that would be great, yes, but I really don't see that
What's that
happening
local
anytime soon.
glass, the price of glass to recycle? If that
Glass in general?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's still no market for glass
They're not
recycling.
buying that whatsoever.
Nope.
So Dave, with those CRT monitors, and if we don't find a vendor in time, what's our alternative? Just stockpile them until we do, or do they go into the landfill? Or
But we can landfill them if we decide that's our only option. We're not regulated. Electronic recycling is not regulated. It's not mandated.
Okay.
So we do it voluntarily. We've been doing it for at least 10 years. But if we have to, we can bury the TVs. We do bury some now only because we can't palletize them and ship them out. And Unicor already had restrictions on what they would take, like the old consoles, the wooden consoles with the TVs. They couldn't take those, so we already buried some of those. But we're still looking for another recycling option. So just wanted to give you an update. That's where we are, and give you a heads up that we may have to restructure the fees for electronics recycling.
What do the private landfill facilities do with them?
If they don't have a specific vendor to recycle them, then they bury them. We know, I believe a lot of the counties still bury them. They don't have a recycling program for electronics, so we're kind of,
Do we get a reduced rate to send our trash to them?
no.
Just a thought.
Yeah, no, we don't.
All right, commissioners, any other questions? Dave, anything else you'd like to present?
That's all I have for right now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Continuing with staff reports, please come forward.
Good morning, Zane Ralph, Highway Department, and with me is Doug Levine. He's our Traffic and Safety Supervisor.
Mr. WHS, what year were you Mr. WHS?
84.
Doug's got a final report on the bike race that was held a couple weeks ago.
Good morning. Between June 20th and June 22nd, 17 county highway employees and one from engineering assisted the Convention and Visitors Bureau with the USA Cycling Race that was in the county. We had men and women flagging at various locations between South County and the Clear Spring area. Giving our employees a chance to work on a higher volume of traffic in a few diverse situations was a good experience. We had different times set up for people to come in. Anywhere between midnight and 5 in the morning, people came in to flag. Had quite a few people during the race when we were making our rounds, checking on everybody and relieving everybody on how informative the county staff was in directing people towards detours and routes. Last year, this was done by a contracted service out of the DC and Richmond, Virginia area. And what we found in our post-race meeting was the contracting services weren't diverse in the area to direct people. So that was a big plus that we did this year. Our flagmen and women were also diverse in helping more so as the safety end of it. We put up an excess of over 120 road closed detours, directional signs, along with type 2 and type 3 barricades for the races. In October, we met at the CVB with the Sheriff's Department, and we were asked to provide the flagging situation and what a cost would be for county to do this. We put a cost together for $18,000. And when we did this, we went a little high, anticipating if there would be a bike wreck, a fire or an emergency situation, or inclement weather to where the race would have had to been halted. So we did a cost of $18,000. And after the race was over, after we did the cost for overtime, for materials, the cost came in at just under $11,000. I was very proud of our employees and the way they stepped up and demonstrated. Some went above and beyond and stuck it out through the whole tenure of all 3 days of races in the county. Very proud of everybody. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the guys from the western section who went out and patched some potholes, removed debris and limbs from the rain that we've had over the last few months, to make the course safe in the Clear Spring area. Also, with the help of the new street sweeper. Last year, we had several complaints the day before the race when they rode the race course about the stones and the washouts, again, from the rain that we had had. I contacted John Swagger, and for 2 days, he had the street sweeper up that went through the whole race course. Not one complaint, not one accident due to debris and stone in the road. So those 2 days, that street sweeper was definitely worth its weight in gold. Also, Jennifer Anderson in engineering put together a map the size of a New York City phone book with every road, every detour, making sure everything was covered. And just shows to me that when all the departments work together, a plan like this works. So also on July 20th at 11:30 at the Sheriff's Department, there'll be a post-race meeting to go over things that went right. Nothing went wrong. From our standpoint, nothing went wrong. But extend that invitation. There'll be the Sheriff's Department there, Fire, Police, people from the CVB, US Cycling. So if you had any questions pertaining to any of that and you wanted to attend, 11:30 on the 22nd at the Sheriff's Department.
The Sheriff's Office worked very closely with you, the deputies out there as well, I think, too, right, Doug?
Mark Knight organized the sheriff's deputies, and at some locations we had sheriff's deputies and highway department flag people together, working together. So It was a lot of work, but it was a success, a great success, and very proud of everybody that signed up and worked that.
You raise a good point about a big event like that does give staff experience for other types of incidents that may occur, how to get detours up and down and work with traffic. So
Right. It was a real good experience, and the fact that we had a lot of newer employees with like a year to 2 years of service that went out and did a big operation like this. It was a good experience for them. They had no idea the high volumes of traffic some of our roads have. Even some of the back roads on the course in the Clear Spring area, they couldn't believe the traffic on some of these roads. So all in all, it was a good experience for everybody.
Any other comments, questions?
Thank you.
Well, one more thing. On June 28th, the Highway Department went up to the War Correspondents Arch for Governor Hogan's Freedom of the Press Day, and our highway guys were up there later in the evening putting up cones and directing traffic. A small crowd attended, but I think if you guys weren't truly there with cones and helping with traffic later on in the evening when people were in the middle of the roads taking pictures of the glowing of the candles in tribute to the fallen journalists, that you probably played an important role from saving any unwanted accidents. You never can measure that because nothing happened, but I feel and I believe your presence where it was noteworthy, and thank you for allowing staff to go up there, and thank you, Doug, for orchestrating that.
You're welcome. I'll pass
and
that
the
on.
other folks that were with you. Thank you again for your assistance.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Commissioners, on the agenda, we have a 10:45 public hearing. If you're okay, I'd like to go to the public hearing and come back to the other items so we can stay on time for an advertised public hearing. Is that acceptable? Is that okay? All right, Mr. DeVito, I think you're up. And before you begin, I'm going to announce that. Okay. Before you begin, the next on the agenda is a public hearing considering the illicit discharge detection and elimination. The purpose of this hearing is to hear public testimony concerning the matter. The procedure is as follows. We will first have staff introduce the matter, after which the hearing will be open to public comment and testimony. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to testify. After everyone who wishes to speak has done so, the hearing will close. The commissioners may then discuss the issue and take any action they may deem appropriate, including adoption or rejection of the proposal, or they may take this issue under advisement and collaborate at a later date. Director DeVito, would you introduce the matter?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. Again, good morning, and this morning we are in front of you to present for this next step in the process for the adoption of the illicit discharge elimination ordinance. And this is a public hearing, and this ordinance is a requirement of our MS4 permit. I think you're all familiar with the MS4 permit. This stormwater discharge permit that is a requirement of the federal and state government. The minimum control measures of this MS4 permit is that we must adopt and enforce an illicit discharge ordinance. And this ordinance was modeled after the guidance that was sent out by the state, was reviewed by our department and the county attorney, and was presented to you, I believe, a couple weeks ago. And again, we are in front of you. Once this ordinance is adopted, again, the ordinance defines what an illicit discharge is and provides for remediation. And again, our primary responsibility and our primary focus on the remediation part of this ordinance is an educational component. And that's to make sure that all the citizens of Washington County are aware and educated in terms of exactly what illicit discharges are and what effects they have on the environment. Again, this is part of the compliance that we need for our MS4 permit. Once this ordinance is adopted by the county, it will also be used by the other jurisdictions in accordance with our memorandum of understanding with those jurisdictions that also hold MS4 permits. They will use our ordinance as a model to develop their own. I believe that's Williamsport, Boonesboro, and Smithsburg, correct? And if there's any questions, John and I will be more than happy to answer them.
I will now open this public comment. Anyone wishing to testify, please come forward. Seeing no one come forward, do the commissioners have any questions? Commissioners? No questions. The public hearing is now concluded. Commissioners, your comments? I would personally like to wait and not vote today on this would be my suggestion, since there's no motion being requested for today. So I'd like to wait and take everything under consideration.
I would like to reiterate what Dave has said very quickly, and that this is required for the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System and for our storm sewer systems.
Have a lot of wiggle room in it.
We do not, sir. We do not, sir. So,
Anything I want to wait and decide
I
on.
understand.
Can I ask what we would be voting on? Because it says recommended motion, nothing.
Not
To return to you
Return is
would
what-
be for the ordinance that is being presented in your agenda report. Yes.
At some point, you have to vote to enact the ordinance.
So how our agenda item was set up today, it was just a review.
That's right.
This was just,
yes.
this was just for public hearing. I guess I should point out that generally, when the county has these types of enforcement ordinances, it's the county's perspective that they first work with the individuals to try and educate the public and ensure compliance voluntarily, rather than use these types of ordinances as a hammer. So that's always been the operative philosophy that the county has used to approach these things. The other thing I would point out is that I would suggest that when we move to adopt this, that there be an update, and I will provide that to the reference regarding the municipal infraction. We actually found that there's a provision in the environmental article that's probably a closer match for that, and we'd just be updating that reference. But what we will do is you all can take this under advisement, and we'll put the matter back on the agenda for a couple weeks for consideration as to official adoption.
Commissioners, you okay with that suggestion? All right, seeing no objections, let's move back to the agenda. Citizens, we're here for participation. We're going to move forward and let you guys come forward. Staff, would you mind waiting till we finish the citizens' participation? Please introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Martin Brubaker. I'm a resident of Washington County, and I have copies of my statement.
Mr. Brubaker, would you include your address for the clerk,
Sure,
please?
Clemensy Road, 925 Hartle Drive,
Thank you, sir.
1 mile southeast of the proposed location of the Kiefer Funk Solar Array. I am here to recommend opposing this project. I've sent you an earlier communication last week, and I'll skip the context of my qualifications in the first paragraph, except to say I have over 50 years' experience in local government in many capacities, in many locations, in many types.
Including MACO.
Yeah, well, including MML.
MML, pardon.
The municipal equivalent, much experience in the legislative committee going over those hundreds of little bills he was talking about. Yep. So I will cut, except to say again that I have over 50 years' experience, and I think it's safe to say I have a record of not being a NIMBY and supporting green energy. But everything has to be weighed and balanced. As you all know, I sat in a seat like yours for 10 years. The Washington County Commissioners and the Maryland Public Service Commission should disapprove the proposal for the Kiefer Funk Solar Energy Generating System for the reasons outlined below in the paper you have. The proposed SEG site, that's the acronym, is not located in an isolated, well-buffered area. It is situated at the eastern peak of one of the highest geographic points along that line across the valley between the South and North Mountains. Very solid homes along Kiefer Funk are in its viewshed. The enjoyment and value of their property will be severely impaired. On the other side of the ridge are the group of subdivisions most of you would know as Black Rock and related subdivisions. Furthermore, and this comes up to an earlier reference today, it is just a few hundred yards. It will be very visible from a well-traveled Whitehall Road, which is also part of a designated scenic bike route entitled A View of the Valley, promoted by the County City and Convention Visitors Bureau in a glossy brochure, which you can all get. It's probably in this building somewhere available. Furthermore, the site plan on file with the county shows a proposed overhead transmission line where none exists at the moment. There are no transmission lines on Kiefer Funk from the apex down to Whitehall in the view shed that I'm talking about at the moment. None. The site plan shows a proposed overhead transmission line heading east along Kiefer Funk towards Whitehall. The application needs to make clear details of a possible substation at that junction or elsewhere, along with any heavying up of lines by the grid power recipient not discussed, all potential major scenic impediments, and I have not heard from the attorney for the applicant. And the residents tried to get answers to some of these questions earlier when I was not involved and did not get answers. So there's major unanswered questions. While the Public Service Commission at the moment has final jurisdiction on this matter, Washington County has appealed that process, as you all are aware, I'm sure. While this PSC at the moment, the board of, ironically, the county itself has established little control over SEGS applications. I don't think that's intentional. I just think it's the way it's worked out. The Board of Zoning Appeals approved a special exception application for this project in May, actually stating that aesthetics were not a standard they should consider. With that precedent, and I emphasize the word precedent, in essence, the whole rural zone, except for a few protected areas, will be subject to these solar arrays. Because that's right now, the way I see it, that's special exceptions, this is not in your statement, are not a good way of controlling land uses for a variety of reasons, which I'm sure Mr. Downey could explain. 2 years ago, Frederick County discarded that method and instituted a procedure making elected officials responsible through a set of specific standards within a zoning approval process. A number of Eastern Shore counties, somewhat similar in economic circumstances to us, have recently updated their codes to provide a more defined way of dealing with that. There's a menu of different approaches available. MACO can point you in the right direction. I have actually talked to some of their staff. Given developments, these developments elsewhere in the state, the relative price of land here, it's not an exaggeration to state we are at risk of becoming a dumping ground for these projects if we don't establish ways to do it. I don't think we should reject them. I think we should welcome them. But we need a balanced, thoughtful, responsive system with criteria that don't put at risk the unrecoverable aspects of our Washington County ambience, and we all know that. If projects are placed in unsuitable locations, and again, I'll emphasize that word precedent, if this case makes it through the Public Service Commission, it's already gotten past the BOA, the Board of Zoning Appeals, we are in jeopardy in land use. If projects are placed in unsuitable locations, some of the immediate fiscal gain, which I know you're all interested in, I know what it is to hunt for tax base, well, it'll be offset by declines in property values in surrounding areas. And over the long range, the county will take on a different aspect to visitors, potential residents, desirable businesses, people coming to use the bike routes, whatever. Other counties are stepping up to the plate. Ironically, they'll be better positioned to take advantage if our court challenge prevails than we are. The Public Service Commission says it is receptive to local input. I talked to their staff as well. Washington County elected officials need to state before the PSC on July 10th, that's tomorrow evening, that while the county remains receptive to appropriate SEGS applications, the Kiefer Funk location is unsuitable for a SEG site for the reasons outlined above, and maybe some to be determined yet at this point. I'll entertain any questions.
Do you have a request for us?
Yes, I recommend that you communicate, send a letter, and make it a public statement to the Public Service Commission that the Board of County Commissioners opposes a SEGS, a solar energy generating system application in this location. And you remain, I think you should feel free to say you remain open to proposals, but this is not an acceptable location.
Administrator Slocum, my apologies. I thought I included you on that email that went out to the commissioners, but this, not letter, but Marty, Mr. Brubaker's. So my apologies on that. I checked yesterday after I left here. I think I want to get the commissioners' consensus to write a letter in support of your group. I had Kirk Downey prepare a draft, but I'm open to any additions to the draft. I know you're under a deadline.
Tomorrow night.
So if it seems I'm trying to rush anything, it's not. I'm trying to assist your group with your deadline. So if the commissioners would want to agree to a letter in support of your group, or how the letter would be changed, I'm okay with that.
So we're supporting the opposition?
I'm supporting this group right here.
We're supporting the group.
Opposition.
Opposite. Yeah.
I have.
I'm sorry, I should have had you
row of
introduce.
citizens in the
My
back there.
apologies.
Raise your hands. Concerned with this application, all opposing it. They appeared, many of them appeared before the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Public Service Commission, but have not.
Do any of them want to speak as well, or are you?
Yes, I believe Colleen Toothman would like to speak as well.
If you want to come up and join Marty, whoever, please, and introduce yourself at address. Terry, you guys can change that letter.
She has some other,
whatever you want.
some other materials,
See
I
if we can
believe.
support them. Please introduce yourself and address for our clerk.
I'm Colleen Toothman, and I have some pictures that I'd like to show.
I'll take them up. Go ahead and start.
Colleen, your address as well.
Is 11350 Kiefer Funk Road.
Thank you.
I am here in opposition, obviously, to the proposed solar project. I live right across the road from this project. My husband and I own 31 and a half acres of land, which 5 of which were used for our home, our yard and driveway. The rest, approximately 26.5 acres, is farmed by our neighbor. As you may have guessed, we have a personal interest in this proposed project as it is being built in our neighborhood. You'll notice that I'll try to refrain from using the term solar farm. In my opinion, and the opinion of many, it is a term used to make it more palatable, but it is really an insult to the agricultural community. My husband and I and many believe in green energy. We buy green energy from for use at our home in electricity. I just personally don't believe that this piece of property using our farmland is the place for solar panels. According to the census, the population of Chewsville is 293 people, many of whom are farmers and have been for over 200 years. It's a small farming community, and we're not happy about losing some of our best farmland in Washington County to solar panels. Once it is gone, we will never get it back. There have been 2 public forums where the public has been invited to attend and then given the opportunity to share their opinions and concerns on why this solar project would or would not be beneficial for our Chewsville neighborhood. 99% of those in attendance opposed the project, excuse me, for many reasons. No one wants to lose our prime farmland. Once it's gone, again, we will never get it back. Every family is worried about the safety, and especially those whose yards where their grandchildren play and they back right up to the solar farm. There are many concerns about our property values diminishing. There was an environmental report given, and we were told this solar project, in quotations, would not be impacting anything in our environment. By definition, environment is the surroundings or conditions in which a person, animal, or plant lives. I can tell you that 40,000 solar panels on 60 to 80 acres of land in our neighborhood will impact our environment. One question that was asked by family members many times at both public meetings was how the electricity would be transferred from the solar site. No one would answer that question. No one would be forthcoming about how that would happen. We would like that question answered. After 2 meetings of opposition with the Public Service Commission, the local board of zoning appeals stunned us by approving the solar project on the basis of a legal case. The solar project was legal as opposed to illegal. Smoking cigarettes is legal. Does that make it the right thing to do? I would like to refute some of the reasons our planning and zoning appeals used as a rationale for allowing the project other than it being legal. It is obscured by grade differences. One of the stated reasons that they heard at the forum were aesthetics, and these were decided that that was not reason enough to to disapprove the project. And yet at the same time, their rationale was that to approve it was that it was obscured by grade differences.
Let me interrupt. I want to be as polite as possible, but it's supposed to be about a 3-minute presentation.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I didn't tell you, but I just wanted to be fair to all the people who in the past tried to speak long, but I do want you to make your point.
Okay, the point is, I would like our local government to take a step back and think about the future of Washington County and other counties in Maryland have already restricted solar development and agricultural land. There are so many other places where these panels could be placed rather than using our farmland. Let's not become the solar intrusion center of Maryland or of the East Coast. And I'm hoping that you refer to my pictures and can see where it is. And I apologize for the length of my...
No offense. I wanted to make sure you had your point made too as well.
Thank you.
All right, is there any other citizens who'd like to speak? And if it's already been said, just...
Are there any questions?
Go ahead.
I'd like to ask Rob a question. I'd like for us to, once these solar projects are in place, is that land, is that considered an agricultural product?
So yes, from what I understand, there's working with Todd Hershey's office, trying to better understand how exactly the tax implications and so forth is that the land use it's an exemption placed on it, and Steve Goodrich and I had this discussion. It's an exemption placed on it as cited here. So it doesn't change the zoning the way I understand it. It's simply an exemption for the solar panels.
What I'd like to do...
The land is still taxed at agricultural rates?
No.
No.
Through the property tax?
SDAT reassesses the use as a commercial use unless there is a payment in lieu of tax agreement, which also would be a substantially higher rate than would a standard agricultural rate. And it would be based on what it would be were there to be no pilot.
All right, what I'd like to do is answer Mr. You'd have to come forward and speak, sir. I'm sorry to not from you. Well, I've been to rules already for length, so please come forward and state your name and thank you. just make a statement. It's basically, this is a comment period. We're not really, we're trying to give you a lot of latitude to cooperate with you. So please give your name and address.
My name is Ron Eiler. I live at 11811 Peacock Trail, which is relatively close to this new project. And I had a question at the last meeting we came to. Is this being subsidized by taxpayers in any way in the form of energy rebates or any? No one seemed to answer that question, and the attorney at the time stated they weren't sure about that. It seems to me a very important question to ask. Are the taxpayers of our county and the state or whatever subsidizing this project in any way? That's the only question I have.
Okay, thank you. Well, what I'd like to get a consensus from the commissioners is to compose a letter. I think you've reviewed it. Maybe we need to make some changes. Could we have it redrafted with some recommendations that Terry had?
I'd be open to discussion.
We'll have to do that.
I think that would.
Go ahead.
I think that letter supports the project.
Okay, we'll make it stronger in support of your group.
Mr. Brubaker, do you have, and maybe the attorney, when does this letter have to be in by?
Tomorrow evening, or else an option would be to ask them to hold their record open, so you would have more time.
Well, we have time to get a letter drafted with a consensus.
But I think you would be better to get it in tomorrow and get it in front of them rather than, as you know, stuff that comes in after hearings is often not looked at.
Mr. Downey, we can compose a letter before this afternoon is over in opposition and supporting that group. Better worded, okay? Is that all right?
And one thing, I know I brought this up earlier on these solar arrays, and I think this could help defer this, is can we come up with a solar array ordinance that puts in there the aesthetics as a procedure, as an actual, this has to be looked at. If there's something that we can do with that.
I think we ought to wait and see what the outcome is of the Court of Appeals case. Because if we're preempted from exercising our zoning authority, it may be a problem.
Okay.
Or could I, Jeff?
Yeah, one more time. I have to move the meeting forward. We're way behind.
Other jurisdictions have incorporated into the zoning process itself rather than making it a special exception.
Yes, it was
but that would take you a good while to accomplish.
Yeah, I know like Queens Anne County, I'm pulling it off of them because they were in a similar situation as we are, is that they had a lot of solar panels coming to them, and so they adopted a solar array ordinance, and we brought that up, and instead of it being fragmented, it was part of the zoning.
Right. And you need standards and criteria.
Exactly.
I have a quick comment,
The same
too.
as Frederick. Frederick has a very strict ordinance.
Yes.
So they're sending it over the mountain, if I may say so.
A quick comment from my end, Mr. Brubaker. First of all, I agree with you 100%. Any letter that we can send should be more strongly worded in opposition to the project. I would also like to let everyone in the audience know who came here to voice opposition as well. We have over 30 county boards that citizens can volunteer to serve on. I would encourage you to go to our website or maybe ask our county clerk, call in one day and volunteer to serve on our boards, including the Board of Zoning Appeals, has citizen members that serve on that board. I would love to see at least 2 of you in the audience apply to serve on that board. So.
Any other citizens' comments? If not, we'll move back to.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll get a letter reworded before the end of the day and approval by the commissioners on the language. Terry, is that acceptable? Terry, okay, thank you. Any other citizens' comments? If you do, please keep it under 3 minutes and come forward. Okay, staff reports continued.
Good morning, Commissioners. Susan Small, Director of Business Development. Excuse me. I'm here today to request your consensus to move forward with 3 letters of support, which will be provided to the City of Hagerstown's Mayor and Council as part of the requests that we have for water line connections via their water and wastewater exception number 6 for an economic development project. They will need letters to review as part of the packet. The recently amended policy states for economic development projects, service approval using the exception is contingent upon recommendation from the county commissioners, the city and economic development directors, the city director of utilities, and approval by the mayor and council for a vital economic development project or an economic development project located in a target economic development area at the airport as delineated in the county's 2002 comprehensive plan. So the 3 letters of support that I'm requesting are in regards to 3 projects, one along Maryland 63, Greencastle Pike and Business Parkway, for 2 industrial flex buildings, a total of 62,500 square feet, $5 million investment, and approximately 50 to 60 jobs will be created. The second is also along Maryland Route 63 near Route 40, and it's a warehouse distribution center with a total of 937,000 square feet, $55 million investment. Anywhere from 100 to 1,000 jobs could be created depending on the end user. And the third is a retail facility with 2 buildings adjacent to the hotel proposed at Citicorp Drive. Building number 1 is 4,500 square feet. Building number 2 is also approximately 4,500 square feet. $15 million investment total between the 2 buildings with approximately 70 part-time and full-time positions. So I will work with the county attorney's office to finalize the letters, and with your approval, we can sign those together and present to the mayor and council as part of the packet.
Consensus you're looking for?
Yes, sir.
Consensus. I see 3 shakes. Wayne, consensus. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other county staff? Please come forward.
Good morning. Scott Hobbs, Director of Engineering, here to introduce Kyle Unger. He'll be working as our civil engineer here with the engineering department. Just wanted him to say hello. He's a lifelong resident, graduate of North High, looking to serve the community and the projects that we have. He'll be working on some drainage projects, stormwater, road projects, various things. Say some words.
I worked down in Germantown for 8 years after graduating from WVU, land development, private land development firm, and then had some kids and wanted to come back home. And I look forward to serving Washington County.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Did you go to Western Heights?
I did.
I remember you.
Uh-oh.
Maybe you remember my brother.
Any other staff reports? Please come forward. Any other staff? Rob, do you have anything to add at this time?
Just over the holiday that there were a number of staff, sheriff's office, number of deputies, and landfill, 911, airport, some highway response calls throughout environmental management that did work through the holiday on occasion, and some more than others. And I'd like to throw a shout out to them, along with what Doug mentioned. We have staff that work 24/7, 365. So thank you to all of them.
While you were absent from the room during commissioner comments, one commissioner praised you on your exchange student and hosting that person. So kudos to you. I think your daughter was also an exchange student at one time, correct?
My wife was hosted an exchange student, yes.
Very good.
And they very much enjoyed the Hagerstown community, so a tribute to the community here. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. Any other staff? If not, we're going to proceed to FY21 Family Law Fund approval to submit application. Please come forward.
Good morning. I'm Stephanie Leopold, Senior Grant Manager. I'm presenting on behalf of Allison Hartshorn. She's unable to be here today. Here with me is Kristen Gross-Nickel, Court Administrator for Washington County Circuit Court. We are seeking approval for the submission of the FY21 Family Law Fund application in the amount of $298,601 and to accept funding as awarded. Through the Family Service Grant Program, the following services are funded in Washington County Circuit Court: salary and fringe benefits of the Family Support Service Coordinator and Permanency Planning Liaison, the Family Law Advice Clinic, and as funding allows, family service programs such as the Parent Education Classes, Custody Evaluations, Children's Attorney, Mental Health and Substance Abuse Evaluations, Parenting Coordinators, Alternative Dispute Resolution, Mediation, and Supervised Visitation. The Office of Grant Management has reviewed the grant funding guidelines. The grant is annually reoccurring, and the funder caps pay increases at 3.5%. If there are any pay increases in FY '21 in excess of 3.5%, the Circuit Court would need to reallocate funds within its approved budget for these expenses. Are there any questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Contract award, workman's comp, third-party administrator. Mr. Curry, welcome.
Good morning. Rick Curry, Director of Purchasing. Brian Overcash, Safety Compliance Training Coordinator, Division of Human Health and Services. Recommended motion is to award the contract for workers' compensation third-party administrative services to the responsible proposer, John Eastern Company Incorporated of Lakewood, Florida, who submitted the lowest proposal of $190,000 per year, and also be contingent upon approval of the contract by County Attorney's Office. The service will cover the county's workman compensations for adjusting and administration on behalf of Washington County of the self-insurance program. It's a one-year contract with 4 one-year period renewals, if optional. The RFP was advertised as we normally do at the various websites, a local newspaper. The RF also provides information as the proposals that were received, the committee members who served on the committee, who evaluated the proposals. Also, you can see the fiscal impact of currently what the county has spent so far this year and what the proposal of John Eastern Company is proposing to charge for a lump sum of the first year. And also in your packet, you have the price proposal attachment for all of the proposals that were open and reviewed.
Commissioners, comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a first and a second. Any other discussion?
One quick question here. There's an asterisk on for the workers' comp for medical and lost time. It says if annual claim count exceeds 20 indemnity or 75 medical only claims per year, the stated per claim handling fee will be charged for additional claims. Was that also associated with the other companies? They had some type of limit, or is that just this John's Eastern?
All the proposals had that if they were to have more additional claims, then there was a fee that would be charged above their base.
That's why I was just getting clarification because I only saw the asterisk on the John's Eastern, so I wanted to make sure it was on all of them.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Have a first and a second. Any more questions? If not, entertain a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Thank you very much. Next, partial release of sewer easement, Todd Moser and Company. Mr. Bradshaw. Good morning.
Good morning. Todd Moser, Real Property Administrator. Joining me, Mark Bradshaw, Deputy Director of Engineering Services. Move to approve the partial release of sewer easement to Chief. Chief has proposed the conveyance of 0.41 acres off Governor Lane Boulevard to Hagerstown Canteen Service INC. The 0.41 acres is encumbered by a 16,660 square feet county sanitary sewer easement. Hagerstown Canteen Service INC is requesting the county vacate a portion of the sewer easement consisting of 1,314 square feet before property is conveyed from Chief to Hagerstown Canteen Service INC. Hagerstown Canteen Service INC is looking to construct an addition to their existing building. In order to construct the addition, a portion of the easement will have to be vacated. Vacating the portion of the sewer easement will have no impact on county sewer infrastructure.
There's no cost to us.
There is no cost.
Commissioners, thoughts, comments?
Make a motion to approve the partial release of sewer easement to Chief.
I have a first, is there a second?
I'll second.
First and a second, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. 4-0, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, leachate hauling from county landfill. Is this the new one?
Good morning, Brandy Noggle, buyer in the purchasing department.
Dave Mason, Deputy Director of Solid Waste.
The recommendation I have for you today is for the bid award 1432 for leachate hauling for the county landfill. The recommended motion is to award the contract for the hauling of leachate to AC&T out of Hagerstown based on their responsible lowest lump sum bid of $337,275. The bid was advertised in the local newspaper, the county's website, and email and marketplace. The contract period is for tentatively to begin July 1st for a period of 1 year with the option for the county to pick up 2 additional consecutive 1-year periods. 16 companies downloaded the document and we did receive 1 bid back. The bid tabulation for the prices is included in this recommendation.
Commissioners, thoughts, comments?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
First and a second. Any additional comments? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah, you're up.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ms. Mace is passing out to you a copy of our most recent quarterly report from March of 2019. Also included behind that is a copy of what our quarterly report used to look like. So hopefully you can see that there have been some changes on that report. And I'd like to give credit to Ms. Mace and also Misty Rosenberry, our accountant in Budget and Finance, as well as Brittany Higgins in Public Relations for the new design of our quarterly. Aside from it looking nicer, in my opinion, it does also contain additional information, along with a lot of the same information that the previous one included. As you can see, what I'd like to do today is just kind of walk through the quarterly for March. I'm not going to focus heavily on the figures after presentation of this quarterly quickly. I can go into how we look for fiscal year 2019. A lot has happened between March and where we are today. But as you can see, it is a new look. We do have the revenue trends that you're used to seeing with our major revenues, which include our real estate tax, income tax, personal property tax, as well as we have some expenditure activity. We always like to monitor that, and we do make sure that each quarter we are in line with where we feel that we should be from an operating perspective, meaning in March we expect to have expended approximately 75% of our budgets. So this is a way that we also track that to keep an eye on it, make sure if anything's looking high that we address those issues. If you turn the page, we have information on employment. So not only is this a fiscal update or summary, it's also an economic update. So we can see, where our employment is by industry. We look at our spending data, what are consumers, how much are they spending, what's our sales and use tax collections look like, because that's an indicator of how well our economy is doing. Another factor in this is, of course, our housing data. We monitor that also. The home sale prices have seemed to continue to rise, so that's good. We have about a $10,000 increase over where we were last year for home sale prices. Unfortunately, we've seen inventory on the market a little bit longer than it was last year, and so not detrimental, but just something to note. But we have seen a reduction in our foreclosure activity, so that's good. Also, on the last page of our quarterlies, we always include, some additional information. What you have on this quarterly is information about our investments, but we also include on the other quarterlies, one quarterly includes debt information and one includes information on county assets. So that page frequently changes. That's similar to the previous quarterly report that you're used to seeing, same page, different format. So if there aren't any questions on this quarterly, I can move on to give you an update on where we stand for 2019. I hope you like the new look of the quarterly. And as always, if there are any questions or concerns on it, please feel free to reach out to me or my staff. We do have this available on our website. So for fiscal year 2019, we've brought you a lot of information over the past couple months related to where we stand for 19. One of the topics of discussion was the speed camera revenue coming in under budget by about $2.5 million. We presented that a couple months ago. That still is the case. That's still what we think is going to happen for the end of the year. That being said, we have received additional investment interest income, more than we anticipated. And we also received revenues from sale of properties. So that is making up for some of that speed camera revenue coming in under budget. So that's the good news. We also are slightly up in our property tax, which is good, both real estate and personal property. Related to income tax, we have seen over the course of this year, up through our distribution in May, that we were below budget for income tax. Last week, or rather it wasn't last week, it was during the June 28th meeting, I stated that I preferred to wait until after June 30th until we get that distribution to provide where we stand for the year. And that was due to the anticipated reconciling distribution that we were due. So I do have some good news here for you, commissioners. That distribution did come in. And in the past, that distribution is known to be quite volatile. So even when the state provides to us documentation and a write-up on our distributions, they always note that that distribution is volatile. So last year, for instance, we received nothing because the state had said that Washington County was over-distributed. So we did not receive a reconciling amount. In previous years, we've received anywhere from $400,000 up to $1.7 million. Okay, so that shows you the fluctuation there. 0, 400,000, 1.7 million. So we were very surprised in Budget and Finance to see that that particular reconciling distribution piece was actually around $5 million for June 30. So that's great news because that was definitely more than what we were expecting. I have reached out to the state with some questions related to this distribution. I have not received answers back from the state, but I do anticipate receiving a response from them because they did acknowledge my email and let me know that they would get back to me. So, income tax, just so that you are aware, is distributed from the state based on formulas that the state determines. So it's distributed to the county, and then these reconciling distributions, make it whole or attempt to make it whole. Included also in that reconciling distributions were tax returns processed and posted to the tax system up through June of 2019 for the 2018 year. Aside from that, or I guess in conjunction with that, expenditures appear to be on budget or slightly under budget for fiscal year 19, so that's good. Are there questions that you have?
Your projections are what percent now in our budget for income tax?
Income tax, honestly, with this most recent distribution a couple months ago, and all throughout fiscal year 19, we were looking about $2 to $2.5 million under budget. With this distribution being $5 million, where in the past, even at the height of it, we received 1.7, we feel like there's a very strong case to be made that we will be on budget and we may exceed budget. We have additional distributions to come in. We have one July 31st and we have one August 30th. So we have to wait for those to be sure. But we're feeling more confident that we will come on budget.
Formula, our income tax that's returned to the county is now 3.2, correct?
It will be as of January 1.
Right.
Yes.
So, what I want clarity on, they have a formula. Why don't they just take 3.2% of all the money that's paid in and return, or is that a formula that they implement first and then reconcile later, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes, I think it's more complicated than necessarily a one sentence answer, but they do estimate the payment to Washington County. They distribute it, and then once they get all of the information in and they process that information, then they can reconcile it.
What I guess I'm trying to just state or fumbling over is that they are volatile.
Yes.
That you're not guaranteed it could be either way.
Right, and just like we've seen right here, I mean, all year, 2019, we have been below budget. 2018, we were below budget. And now we have a $5 million reconciling distribution that far exceeds what we have received in the past, even at the height, even though it's volatile. So, yes, it is
So
volatile.
because this was a reconciling distribution, we can be confident that that number's at this point is completely accurate?
The state assured me that it was accurate, number one, so they did respond to
In
that.
writing?
What's that?
In writing?
In writing? Yes, in an
They're
email.
not going to ask for it back, or are they?
No, I don't think we have to be concerned about that. My questions to them were related to how much, or is a portion of this related to the effects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act? Because preliminary reports from the state for Washington County were that possibly around 2020, we would be seeing an increase in income tax, a little bit over $1 million. Well, that doesn't explain a $5 million distribution, even if that were from the effects of taxpayer related decisions for that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So I feel like there has to be something else there, some more substance. Possibly the distributions that they provided throughout the year were low, and possibly the formula they were using was low. I don't have those answers yet, but I have reached out.
So a question, how does this impact our fiscal year 2020 budget? And that as you were preparing our 2020 fiscal year budget, you were projecting that we were coming out of with a loss from the prior fiscal year of 2 to 2.5 million. Is that what you said?
That's true. That is what I said. And this may have an impact on our fiscal year 2020 distributions. I think what we've seen here, though, is that income tax is volatile. And so I think we have positioned ourselves well to be on the opposite spectrum of that. We've been playing catch up for 2 years now. So now that we have some positive news, I think that's going to be to our benefit moving forward. Keep in mind, we have dedicated $2.5 million of our capital reserves toward our capital plan for 2020 because we didn't have the cash to provide for that capital plan. So we were taking it from our reserve account. If we do get a distribution and we end the year next year higher than expected, we won't have to take as much from reserves, hopefully. So there will be an impact.
You also took, just as a reminder, just this morning, you took how much from reserves for?
Up to
fire and-
$2.5 million for fire and EMS distributions. Yes.
Quick question.
Sure.
On page 4, the proprietary funds, the budget versus revenues you received year to date, is the budget the annual budget, and then the revenues is what we received year to date?
Yes,
Okay,
that
so
is
that's where
correct.
there's the
Sorry
huge
about
gap
that.
on every single one. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't
Yes.
budgeted.
Yes, of course. So as of March, we would expect to be about 3/4 of the way through. It's not always a one-to-one with those because we have billing cycles that need to be taken into account, but yes,
Okay.
full
fine.
budget.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, any more comments?
Like, how does the sewer fund look for year to date? I mean, for fiscal year?
We're gonna be under budget for our revenues, I think, but we're also gonna be under for our expenses. So where that gap lies, you know, I did take a brief look at it last month, in about the middle of the month, maybe $1 million for the year, under $1 million for our loss.
Okay.
You know, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, thank you.
Which is not bad considering.
We were expecting 2.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
We, just to kind of follow up, we will continue to receive some revenues for FY19. We'll post it back. We also have the ability to post expenditures to FY19 still. We have not closed the year yet, even though our end of year is June 30. So we actually won't have final year figures until probably about September timeframe, just to give you an idea of when that'll be coming.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Just a point of order, Commissioners, thank you. Seen a update of the draft of the letter, so please get any comments or additions into